Okay, can I have your attention, please? Thank you. My name is Adam Gregg, and I have the incredible honor of serving you in the role of Lieutenant Governor. I want to start out by saying thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to battle the weather a little bit and come join us for this important conversation at this Invest in Iowa Town Hall. You know, Governor Kim Reynolds and I travel all 99 counties every year, and we do that because it gives us a great opportunity to hear directly from the people that we represent and talk with you about our ideas and hear your thoughts and your concerns. And that's exactly why we're here today. You know, one of the things that I often say is that when you sign up for, all the easy problems get solved long before they ever make it to the governor's office. So when you sign up for a job like governor or lieutenant governor, you're signing up for the tough problems. And to solve those tough problems, it usually takes bold solutions, and it definitely takes strong leadership. And Governor, in a few minutes, is going to talk about the Invest in Iowa Act. I want you to pay attention to how many of the tough problems our state faces that this bill can help us solve. Whether that's making our tax code more competitive, or finding sustainable funding for our mental health system, or for water quality, or conservation or quality of life efforts. I can tell you that as a husband, and as a father, and as an Iowan, I'm really proud of the fact that Governor Reynolds has led with such a bold and comprehensive solution that invests in our state, not just now, but for decades to come. So with that, will you please join me in welcoming the Governor of Iowa, Kim Reynolds.
Well, good afternoon. It is great to be back in Oskaloosa. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it very much. Mayor, thank you for joining us. Former Representative Guy Vanderlinden, thank you also for joining us. And Commissioner Riley, thank you for being here too. So, and most of all, thank you for being here. To give us an opportunity to talk to you about a bold initiative that really addresses a lot of issues and concerns that we heard from Iowans as we were traveling across the state. The Invest in Iowa, I had the opportunity to kick it off today with our weekly press conference, and I was so pleased to be joined by a diverse group of really engaged Iowa leaders from across multiple stakeholders. We had individuals that represented several organizations, whether it was taxpayers, businesses, agriculture, legislature. The legislature was represented, mental health and substance use treatment providers, advocates, and parents all participated in the press conference this morning. In the condition of the state, which I had the honor of giving for the third time this year, I talked about the accomplishments that we've achieved over the years, but most importantly, it was an opportunity for me to lay out our vision. And I said, as we move into this next decade, we shouldn't just talk about 2020. We should really talk about 2030, 2040, and beyond. And we do have great things happening in the state, but we can't become complacent or take things for granted. We really need to plan for the future. So the Invest in Iowa Act takes that first bold step. It is an investment in our future, and it is an investment in those who are our future. There are three main pieces to the Invest in Iowa Act. First of all, tax relief. Second of all, it fully funds our mental health system, and it further improves our water quality of life with historic funding by funding the Natural Resource and Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund. So first I'm going to talk about the tax component of the Invest in Iowa Act. And what it does is it builds on the historic tax cuts that I signed into law in 2018, allowing more Iowa families to keep more of their hard-earned money. The income tax plan, it cuts the individual tax rates. It's about a 10% across the board cut. For a majority of lower income Iowans, it's a 25% across the board, 25% cut. It also takes our highest tax rate, which right now is 8.5%, and it reduces that by 2023 to 5.5%. It reduces the number of tax brackets, which are currently at 9. In 2021, it takes that to 8. And then by 2023, it reduces that even further to 4 tax brackets. So it really helps streamline, simplify the income tax system in the state of Iowa while reducing the overall tax burden on Iowans, making us more competitive. And the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation scored the plan, and if we were to implement the Invest in Iowa Act and the income tax reduction component of it, It will actually take Iowa's rankings. Right now, we're 42nd in the country. That is not a competitive place to be. And if we can put this into, if we can pass the Invest in Iowa Act, it will take Iowa to 20th. So we still have a lot of progress to make, but that certainly makes us more competitive with our neighbors. So other notable tax changes in the bill is it repeals the water excise tax, which lowers water bills for Iowans. It exempts, further exempts some items like diapers and feminine products from state sales tax. And another issue that we hear a lot about as we travel the state is access and affordability to daycare. So that's keeping people out of the classrooms, and it's keeping adults out of the workforce. And so it expands the eligibility for the early childhood tax credit from $45,000 to $90,000 for an eligibility requirement for the early childhood tax credit. Second, the Invest in Iowa Act would fund water quality, conservation, and outdoor recreation at historic levels. In 2010, Iowans voted to amend the Constitution to create the Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, really for the purpose of protecting and enhancing water quality and our natural resources. And to date, that was 10 years ago, the fund has not been funded. So under the plan, it would fund the trust fund, and it would put nearly $100 million per year would be allocated to water quality efforts. $55 million per year would be allocated to conservation and outdoor recreation. The nutrient reduction strategy program that was put in place several years ago and then funded, additional funding went into it in 2018, would be kind of the foundation of the water quality efforts. So whether it's urban or rural, producer or consumer, the health of our soil and quality of water really matter to every Iowan, and every one of us has a responsibility to protect it. And this kind of the third piece of the Invest in Iowa Act, it fulfills our promise to fully fund our mental health systems. So 2 years ago, we reformed our adult mental health system. And then last year, we created the first ever children's mental health system. And I want to thank the legislature really for their strong bipartisan support in both of those issues. The children's mental health system, I think, passed unanimously, as well as the reform to the adult mental health system. So we can work together here in Iowa to get big things done, and that was certainly an example of that happening. But to date, property taxpayers have supplied most of the financial support through the county to the local mental health regions. And through the Invest in Iowa Act, we would reduce the property tax levy, so reduce the property tax burden to fund the mental health services and provide the needed funding through the state general fund. So again, that just strengthens the partnership between the state and regional, the regions, the mental health regions. It provides predictability and stability to the entire system and really helps keep our promise that no Iowan should have to suffer in silence and not have access to the services that they need. So whether it's tax cuts or water quality or mental health funding, the Invest in Iowa Act will bring meaningful change to Iowans in the very first year. It will improve our quality of life, and it will help us, I believe, retain and recruit the next generation of Iowans to this great state. So look forward to continuing the conversation and working with members of the legislature to make that happen. And so now the Lieutenant Governor and I are going out on the road, and really we're here to answer any questions that you may have, take any suggestions that you may have. We're working with stakeholders and individuals and walking them through the bill, so we're here to listen and take back anything that we may hear and hopefully answer some questions that you may have. So with that, we'll open it up to questions or comments.
In soil conservation, are you working with NRCS then on federal level on soil conservation?
Yeah, so when I talked about the funding levels through the trust fund, that will bring about $172 million annually into the fund. And as I said, 100 of that will go to water quality, 55 will go to conservation and recreation, but 15 million of that really is something that the local water quality and conservation projects and boards can work with for some funding with that as well. So it's The dollars are funded through the 7 different projects that are in place, and then the legislature will allocate the funding. But yes, all of that ties together.
Governor, I heard you talk about tax relief, and then I heard you talk about a number of expenditures that weren't happening now that are gonna happen.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you say raise the sales tax rate,
Yep.
which is also in the bill.
Yep.
I think a good way to tell whether it's tax relief or not is to say, is this gonna increase revenue to the state overall, or is it gonna decrease revenue to the state overall?
It will decrease revenue to the state overall, but it is an overall tax cut to Iowans. So it is increasing the sales tax. 3/8 of that goes to the trust fund, and then 5/8 goes to overall tax reduction through reducing the income tax rates. Is there anything else, Joel, that I need to add to that?
Actually, so we're giving back more than 8/8.
Oh, yeah, well, on top of that, because it's tax cut. Oh, good point. Yeah, I need to be careful how I say that, because it is an overall tax reduction. It builds on the tax cuts from 2018. It actually doubles the amount that we had projected in cutting the taxes in the first full year that it is implemented. And then again, makes us more competitive from our income tax rate structure. So we're hoping in the long term that we'll continue to grow and drive the economy by being more competitive, by working with our workforce to get Iowans the skills to fill the jobs that are open on a daily basis and continue to grow our overall revenue. And the triggers are still in place, so we are looking at a piece of those to make them more aligned better, but we wanted to make sure that we were being fiscally responsible and that it was sustainable for the long term. With the budget that I put in place and the priorities that we've laid out, we still project ending fiscal year 2021 with close to a $400 million surplus. And then the taxpayer trust fund would have approximately $250 million in it at that time. So we have several safeguards as we move through the process.
I think I understand you correctly, Ms. Miller, if I don't, but on the conservation side, there's a formula involved, what was passed back in 2000.
Yep, yep.
And I'm hearing that may be a football being talked about. I don't think the formula needs to be changed, but I may not be an educator on that.
Yeah.
Is it true, though, that that formula may change?
Yeah,
Or
and
is
at,
it guaranteed change?
so the bill that I presented did change the allocation. So I was in the Iowa Senate when we passed that in the Senate, and I voted for that, but that was 10 years ago. And with the change that we're seeing with innovation and technology and how we approach water quality conservation efforts, we need the makeup of the allocation needed to be taken a look at. It also, we needed to address it to have any chance at all of getting it moved through the legislature. So what we did over the interim was we brought all stakeholders, to as many as we could get, together, and we sat down and started, really walking through what that looked like. I had some of our people that were very, very focused on water quality efforts, felt that they needed to get hit a certain percentage of the overall funds for them to be, a part of the discussion moving forward. We almost got there a little bit short, and then we wanted to make sure that when we're talking about quality of life and recreation, we want people staying in rural Iowa and coming to the state. That is also a very important component of the trust fund as well. And so it makes significant increases in that respect as well, but it's maybe more balanced. And then as part of the bill, I think that's really important in 10 years, it asks everybody again, 10 years down the road to take a look at that and make sure that, it doesn't need adjusted then, because with technology and innovation, things change very, very rapidly, especially with cover crops and edge of field and bioreactors and some of the conservation practices that we're seeing today evolve. It's going to look different even in a year or two. And so we need to make sure that we have some flexibility. And I think to be realistic and look at it, it would be short-sighted for us maybe to just not make some changes to address what we think is the need for right now.
So in 10 years, the opportunity is to change the formula again, or to drop the...
Change the formula again. And that's always something we can take a look at too, but right now to change the 3/8 will be constitutionally protected, so that's done. But there are other opportunities that we could look at to provide additional tax cuts going forward. But the allocation could be looked at. So it's currently the child care tax credit that's in place, and right now to utilize that, the eligibility, the income is for up to $45,000. And so what we did is, in the bill, it says that to qualify for that, we've moved the eligibility from $45,000 up to $90,000 for families to qualify for that tax credit for child care. In addition to that, I've also put a program in place. It's kind of a pilot program that would address the CLIF. Are you familiar with that? As individuals advance in their career and they earn additional income, the first thing that they lose is their support system. So what happens is a lot of times as they advance in their career, childcare is the first thing that's ripped away from them. They don't qualify for that. And it just doesn't make any sense. Their salary isn't increased enough to cover what they've lost in the childcare, and so they're not taking advantage of these opportunities. So what the bill does that we put forward is it actually phases it out and helps, continue to provide that support system until they can get stabilized and earn an income where they can provide and pay for their daycare and just have a career that provides them the quality of life that they need. So that's another thing that we're working on. What's the other thing? There's another one I can't think of. Employer. And then another part of what we've put in place to address access and affordability of childcare, it's through the Future Ready Iowa initiative, which is our, workforce initiative that we passed, again, unanimously for those of you who are writing things down. I think that's exciting. 3 years ago, and I think we almost unanimously funded it last year, and now we're implementing it. And for the last dollar scholarships, $13 million is being allocated to 6,000 Iowans who are working their way through a 2-year degree to get the skills to fill the high demand jobs that are available today. And then another component of that was the Employer Innovation Fund, where you can put a program together that's tied to workforce needs locally, and then there's a state match up to $50,000. So we've added to that the Child Care Challenge Fund, I think is what we're calling it, with a match up to $100,000, because we know there might be larger needs. Maybe it's a facility or a business is working with other businesses. So for $75,000 that they put into the program, the state would match up to $75,000 if they qualify. It's a last dollar scholars. It's for individuals right out of high school or adults that want to reskill, retrain. It's Future Ready Iowa. If you're going to, I'll make sure that you get the website before we leave. But they can apply for that. And like I said, we have 6,000 Iowans. 80% of them are adults. And so we'll hook you up. And because there's a lot of different ways that you can use it for books or there's a lot of flexibility there. It's the last dollar in, and so they can talk to you about how you can do that. And when you talk to the students that are going through the program, it really has been impactful, and it's allowed them to get the skills that they need, they're all tied to high demand jobs right now, but there's a lot of opportunity there. And then the community colleges have some flexibility too with each one of the regions on some additional jobs that would qualify as well. Yep.
How would she get through that process, and then is it possible to help the local Keola State Park in a way get funded?
Yep. So they have to be confirmed by the Senate, and they go through committee. They have a chance to meet with all of the senators. Then it moves. If it's favorable, it moves out of committee, and then it goes to the floor for a vote. So typically, the legislature has allowed the governor to be respectful of the team that they're trying to put together. So Kayla's working very hard, meeting with the senators. She's done a great job of really getting out in the state and visiting a lot of the state parks, visiting a lot of the facilities, listening. I think that that's really important when you're a new director for one of the agencies, so she's really doing a good job of doing the outreach. And there would be some funding. The local match that I talked about might be an opportunity. We also, it's the 150th year, I think, of Iowa Park System, so I know there's a public-private partnership. Is it 150? 100? Okay, I think it's 100, yeah. Yeah. So I think there's public-private partnership also that they've been working on that would put, provide some additional funding for some of our parks.
Hey, Eric Sitzma, Oskaloosa resident. Governor, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come out and talk to you today. Thank you for putting forward the Invest in Iowa Act. It's a great opportunity. As a lot of you know, I'm fairly involved in volunteering for local conservation. We do have an application going in for public-owned lakes for Lake Keoma project with Conservation District and the State Department of Natural Resources, Parks, and Lake Restoration. And this money would be involved in that. So thanks for the opportunity for that, and thank you for investing, allowing us the opportunity to get IWIL funded.
Yeah.
It's great. It comes down to our quality of life right here in Mahaska County. Thank you for putting it forward.
It really does, especially through that 50 million plus the other funding mechanisms, I think allows us to be very purposeful in funding a lot of our natural resources and great assets that we have across this state. So thank you for being that. So be sure and talk to your legislators. I wouldn't be doing my part if I didn't say that. So if it is something that you're supportive of, let them know, because they are there to represent you. So if this is something that you think is a good idea and it really does set Iowa up for the next generation of Iowans and help us attract and recruit and retain Iowans, and be sure and let your representatives know that you support it. Anything else? Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you taking the time. Oh,
Governor, if your goal is to promote the 1 cent sales tax increase, I think it would be very helpful to be specific on how it's going to actually help the water quality. From what we read and hear, the water quality continues to worsen.
yeah.
So the money that we're spending on it doesn't seem to be helping much. So how would you deal with what can be done in addition with the additional money that's going to make a difference?
Well, we have seen some progress. Secretary Naig joined me this morning at the press conference, and with the nutrient reduction strategy that we passed years ago, well, that's another really good point that I forgot to even bring up. So when we talk about the reallocation of the funds, that program wasn't even in existence 10 years ago. So we have taken multiple steps within the 10 years to address some of the concerns to make sure that we can put sustainable long-term and a growing revenue source to address water quality issues in the state of Iowa. So he can walk through, the secretary has to give a report annually to talk about the projects that they've implemented, the number of conservation projects that have gone in place, and what some of those outcomes are. But Mother Nature too is Mother Nature, so it's not, we're always dealing with that a little bit, but he has made significant progress, and this will allow us to put additional funding into the programs that are working and scale the efforts that farmers and producers are really implementing all across the state. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. We don't do a very good job of really telling the story about how many private sector dollars are really individual dollars that are going into conservation practices. My husband was a district soil conservationist with NRCS, and he was in that position for about 36 years, working with not only farmers but our urban areas too. Through urban conservationists, we also play a role in water quality efforts, and there's some funding there for that. So this will allow us, I think, to really drive the dollars into the strategies through science-based programs to start to really make a difference moving forward. And it lays out how many dollars goes into which program, so you'll be able to see that.
Does Iowa Natural Resources Committee have resources to take care of certain situations as far as soil conservation is concerned?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, supposedly
Uh-huh.
He's committee chair on the Iowa Natural
Yep.
Resources Committee.
Yep.
And I understood that they had money allocated to take care of situations that are involved with severe soil conservation and soil loss.
Yep.
And that's what I've been following through. And before you leave, I'd like to visit you for about 2 minutes.
Sure, I'll do that. And then maybe we can have better idea of what your specific question is, and I can get you to the right person to answer that. Okay? Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.